The air inside the courtroom felt heavy, almost electric, as if everyone had been holding their breath for too long. It was one of those cases that had gripped the entire community for months. A brutal crime that shocked everyone and divided opinions. Reporters lined the back benches, their laptops open, cameras hanging from their necks, waiting for the final moments of the trial. Every seat was filled, every whisper sounded too loud. At the defense table sat a man in his mid-30s, dressed neatly in a dark suit. His hands were clasped so tightly on the table that his knuckles had gone white. His eyes stared straight ahead, fixed on some invisible point. He had barely spoken throughout the trial, his lawyers doing most of the talking for him. To many, he already looked guilty. To others, there was something about his quietness that felt like defeat, not admission. Across from him, the prosecutor shuffled through a stack of papers, occasionally glancing up at the jury, as though making sure they were still convinced of the narrative she had spent weeks weaving. The judge, an older man with a calm but commanding presence, sat with his hands folded, watching everyone with sharp, patient eyes. Then came the sound that shifted the mood of the entire room, the heavy door at the side of the courtroom creaking open. In walked a police officer, followed closely by a large German shepherd. The dog's nails clicked against the polished wood floor with each step. His coat was a perfect blend of black and tan, his ears standing tall, his movements controlled but powerful. This was Rex, the department's most trusted K9, the dog whose actions on the night of the crime had been a critical piece of evidence in the case. People sat up straighter. A few reporters whispered to one another, scribbling in their notepads. This wasn't just for show. Rex's behavior had been a focal point of the investigation, his tracking that night leading officers to where the defendant was arrested. This was supposed to reinforce the prosecution's case, to remind the jury that Rex's instincts had pointed them toward this very man. Near the back of the room, sitting quietly with her mother, was a little girl who had been allowed in only because she was too young to be left at home. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, dressed in a soft yellow dress with her hair tied in 2 neat braids. Her feet dangled above the floor as she sat on the bench, swinging them slightly to pass the time. She had been unusually quiet during the proceedings, almost as though she knew this wasn't a place for noise. But when Rex entered, something changed. Her eyes widened the second she saw him. The casual, almost bored look on her face vanished, replaced by something sharper, more alert. Her small fingers tightened around her mother's hand, squeezing so hard that her mother flinched. "Sweetheart, what is it?" her mother whispered softly, leaning down toward her. The girl didn't answer right away. She just stared at the dog, her chest rising and falling more quickly now. Rex seemed to notice her too. For a brief moment, his steady trot faltered as he glanced in her direction, ears flicking forward, nostrils flaring as if he'd caught a familiar scent. His handler tugged gently on the leash, guiding him toward the front, but the dog kept looking back toward the child. The girl's breathing quickened. She tugged again on her mother's sleeve, this time more urgently. "Mom," she whispered, "that's him." Her mother frowned, confused. "That's who, honey?" The little girl didn't explain. Instead, she slid off the bench before her mother could stop her. The wooden floor creaked under her tiny shoes as she stepped into the center aisle. The murmur of voices stopped immediately. All eyes turned toward the child, surprised to see her out of her seat. "Excuse me," a bailiff said softly, moving forward as though to guide her back. But before he could touch her shoulder, the judge lifted a hand. "Let her be," he said calmly, though even his eyes were curious. "Go on, young lady. What is it you want to say?" The courtroom went completely silent. You could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above, the rustle of paper from one of the attorneys setting down a file. The girl didn't speak right away. She just stood there, her small frame looking impossibly delicate in the cavernous courtroom. Slowly, she raised one hand, her finger pointing straight at the dog. The gesture was so unexpected that even the prosecutor paused mid-step, looking between the child and Rex. The German Shepherd had stopped moving entirely now, his whole body tense, ears forward, tail motionless. It was as if he, too, was waiting for what would happen next. The defendant turned his head slightly, just enough to glance at the little girl from the corner of his eye. His jaw tightened. "Sweetheart," her mother whispered again, half pleading, "come back here." But the girl didn't move. For a moment, the courtroom seemed frozen in time. The girl's eyes locked on Rex, and Rex, in turn, didn't look away. It was a strange, silent standoff. A child and a dog in perfect stillness, while everyone else waited with bated breath. Then the girl's lips parted, and though her voice was quiet, it carried clearly through the room. The girl's lips trembled as every eye in the room fixed on her. "He remembers," she said softly. For a moment, there was absolute silence. No one moved, no one even breathed. Then the words seemed to ripple through the courtroom like a shockwave. Someone in the gallery gasped. The prosecutor froze mid-step, staring at the child as though she'd just spoken in a foreign language. Even the court reporter, who had been dutifully transcribing every word of the trial, hesitated and glanced up from her stenograph machine. The judge leaned forward on the bench. "What did you say, young lady?" The little girl swallowed hard, but didn't lower her hand. "He remembers," she repeated, louder this time, her small voice echoing in the chamber. Rex let out a short, sharp bark, just one, but it was enough to make everyone jump. The handler tugged on the leash instinctively, but Rex didn't budge. His entire body was alert now, every muscle coiled, his gaze locked not on the defendant, not on the judge, but on the child standing in the aisle. The judge looked at the handler. "Is this normal?" The handler hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden attention. "Your Honor, Rex is highly trained. He doesn't bark in court unless—" He stopped himself, as though realizing that finishing that sentence might reveal more than he was authorized to say. "Unless what?" The defense attorney pressed, rising to his feet. "Unless he recognizes a scent or a person connected to his training," the handler admitted reluctantly. That statement landed like a thunderclap. The prosecutor's lips parted, but no sound came out. The jury shifted uncomfortably, a few members exchanging glances. The little girl took a step forward, her mother whispering frantically for her to sit back down, but the judge didn't intervene. If anything, he looked intrigued. "Come closer," he said gently, beckoning her forward. The bailiff, still standing nearby, looked uneasy. "Your Honor, she's just a child." "Exactly," the judge interrupted. "And she seems to have something to say." "Let's hear it." The girl walked slowly, her small shoes tapping against the wooden floor. The sound was the only thing breaking the silence. Rex shifted slightly, his tail twitching, but his gaze never left her. When she was just a few feet away, she stopped and spoke again. "He remembers what happened that night," she said firmly, almost as if speaking directly to the dog. The entire courtroom seemed to collectively hold its breath. "Child," the judge said gently, "how do you know that?" The girl hesitated. Her small hands twisted the hem of her dress, but her voice didn't waver. "Because I was there." "And he saw the man too." Murmurs erupted in the gallery. The prosecutor shot to her feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This is highly irregular. We can't just take testimony from a—" "Sit down, counsel," the judge said sharply. "We will decide what's irregular after we hear what she has to say." The defense attorney's face had lit up with cautious hope. His client turned in his seat for the first time, his expression somewhere between disbelief and desperate curiosity. The girl pointed at Rex again. He chased the man away. I saw him. I saw everything. Rex gave another bark, this one softer, followed by a low whine as he inched forward on the leash. His handler looked to the judge for direction, but the judge merely nodded. "Let the dog approach," he said. There was a moment's hesitation, then the handler loosened his grip. Rex trotted forward, tail wagging slightly, until he was standing right in front of the child. He sniffed the air around her, then sat down. A trained response, meaning he recognized a familiar scent or person. The girl crouched a little, looking into the dog's eyes. "See? He remembers me," she said, her voice so certain it sent a chill through everyone listening. The prosecutor tried to recover. "Your Honor, this is theatrics." The child is likely confused, but before she could finish, Rex gave a trained alert. A sharp bark followed by sitting perfectly still, the exact signal used when he had identified a suspect or key witness. The jury's reaction was instant. A wave of whispered conversations, shocked glances, and widened eyes. The judge had to bang his gavel twice to restore order. The defendant's attorney was already on his feet. "Your Honor, this changes everything. This girl is a first-hand witness, and the dog is corroborating her presence at the scene. We request an immediate recess so this testimony can be properly heard." The judge looked from the attorney to the child, then back to Rex, who was sitting patiently, gaze still locked on the little girl, as though waiting for more. "This is highly unusual," the judge admitted, rubbing his temple. "But unusual doesn't mean irrelevant. Court will recess for 30 minutes. We will speak with the child privately before determining how to proceed." The bailiff guided the little girl and her mother out of the courtroom, as whispers erupted on every side. The prosecutor looked shaken, quickly gathering her files, while the defense attorney leaned down to whisper something to his client, who now looked alive with hope for the first time since the trial began. Rex was led out of the courtroom as well, though not before he looked back one more time, almost protectively, toward the child. When the door closed, the room buzzed with a mixture of fear, excitement, and disbelief. What had just happened wasn't part of anyone's plan. No one, not the attorneys, not the jury, not even the judge, could have predicted that a quiet little girl would stand up and speak words that might completely unravel the case. And yet, everyone knew this was just the beginning. The witness room was small and plain, a stark contrast to the dramatic energy of the courtroom outside. A single table sat in the center with a few metal chairs. The hum of the fluorescent light overhead was the only sound as the judge entered, followed by the prosecutor, defense attorney, bailiff, and court reporter. The little girl sat quietly beside her mother, her small legs dangling off the chair. Rex, the police dog, was there too, lying at his handler's feet but alert, watching the girl with those focused, intelligent eyes. His ears twitched every time she shifted. "All right," the judge said gently as he sat down, setting aside his black robe so he appeared less intimidating. "Young lady, you've said some very important words in that courtroom. Do you understand why everyone is listening so carefully to you?" The girl nodded, though her hands gripped the edge of the chair nervously. "Good," the judge continued. "Can you tell us what you meant when you said he remembers?" The girl looked at Rex, then back at the judge. "Because I remember too," she said, her voice quiet but steady. Her mother squeezed her hand. "Sweetheart, you can tell them what you told me," she encouraged softly. The girl took a deep breath. "That night, I heard yelling outside my window. Mom was asleep. I got up to look because it sounded scary. I saw a man running through the alley. And I saw him." She pointed at Rex. "He was chasing the man." The prosecutor's brow furrowed. "You saw the suspect? Do you recognize the man sitting in that courtroom as the one you saw?" The girl hesitated, then shook her head firmly. "No, it wasn't him. The man I saw was taller. and he had a big scar right here. She traced a line down her own cheek to show where. The defense attorney's jaw dropped slightly. This was the first time anyone had heard about a facial scar on the suspect. Your Honor, this is a crucial detail that was never entered into evidence, he said, his voice barely hiding his excitement. The prosecutor stiffened. With all due respect, this is a 6-year-old child. Children's memories can be unreliable, especially after months. But before the judge could respond, Rex suddenly stood. He took 2 steps toward the girl and gave a soft, low bark, then sat back down, the exact alert he had given in the courtroom. The handler cleared his throat. Your Honor, that's Rex's confirmation behavior. He recognizes her scent from that night. He's saying she was present at the scene. That revelation sent a visible shiver through the room. The judge leaned forward. You're telling me this dog remembers her from the night of the crime? Yes, Your Honor, the handler replied. Our Canine South are trained to remember scents associated with cases. Rex clearly recalls her presence. The girl spoke again, more urgently now. He chased the man, but he didn't catch him. Then someone called him back. He was so close, but the man got away. The bailiff and court reporter exchanged uneasy glances. This account was diverging sharply from the official police report, which had stated that Rex led officers directly to the defendant's house. The defense attorney was quick to seize the moment. Your Honor, if this is true, then the entire narrative of the prosecution's case is flawed. The man my client was accused of being may never have been caught that night. The prosecutor looked shaken, but tried to remain composed. Even if this child is correct, we still have circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence that may now be inadmissible. The defense attorney cut in. Enough, the judge said firmly, raising a hand. This is not the place for arguments. We will reconvene and determine how to proceed. But first, he turned back to the girl. I need you to tell me everything you remember, as clearly as you can. Start from the beginning. The girl nodded. Slowly, haltingly at first, she told her story. She described how she'd been awakened by the shouting, how she'd climbed onto the chair to peek out the window, how she'd seen the man's face clearly under the street lamp. She remembered Rex's barking, how loud it was, and how the man had looked terrified as he tripped and fell, then scrambled to his feet. He looked right at me, she said softly, her voice cracking just a little. He saw me watching him. Then he ran away. I think he knew I saw. The mother wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, pulling her close. By the time the girl finished, the room was silent again. The judge's expression was unreadable, but his fingers tapped slowly against the table as he thought. This testimony, he said at last, is too significant to ignore. We will bring the jury back in. This child will be called as a witness, and the court will view the body cam footage from that night again. The prosecutor opened her mouth as if to protest, but then shut it again, realizing she had little choice. Rex gave a final soft bark, almost as though agreeing with the decision, and lay back down, tail thumping once against the floor. The judge rose to leave the room, but before he did, he looked down at the girl. You've been very brave today, he told her. What you said may change everything. Are you ready to speak in front of everyone? The girl hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. Yes, the judge gave a small smile. Then we shall let the truth be heard. When they stepped back into the courtroom, the room was already buzzing with speculation. Reporters were poised with pens and cameras, jurors whispering among themselves, until the bailiff called for order. The defendant's eyes flickered with something new, hope. And though no one could have known it yet, those 2 simple words the child had spoken, he remembers, were about to dismantle everything the prosecution thought they had proved. The courtroom doors swung open, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Everyone knew something had happened during the recess, They could see it in the judge's steady expression, the prosecutor's pale face, and the girl's determined little steps as she returned with her mother. Reporters leaned forward in their seats. Jurors straightened their backs, sensing that the trial was no longer proceeding as expected. Even the defendant, who had sat stone-faced for days, looked alert, his fingers tapping nervously against the table. Rex entered last. The big German shepherd padded silently across the floor, his handler guiding him toward the witness stand. But this time, Rex didn't stop at his usual place. His head turned toward the little girl the moment he saw her, tail wagging once before he sat down on his own, facing her. The courtroom murmured, a ripple of sound the bailiff quickly tried to quiet. The judge raised a hand for silence. "This court will now hear the testimony of a new witness," he said, his deep voice cutting through the noise. "Approach the stand, young lady." The girl let go of her mother's hand and climbed onto the witness chair. Her feet didn't reach the floor, so she sat very still, clutching the wooden armrests. The clerk administered a simplified oath suitable for a child, as she nodded solemnly that she would tell the truth. "Can you tell us your name?" the judge asked gently. She gave it. Her voice was small, but clear enough for everyone to hear. "And how old are you?" "6. A few jurors smiled faintly at the way she held up 6 fingers to prove it. But the moment was brief. The gravity of what she was about to say quickly set the room back into silence. "Now," the judge said, leaning forward, "you told us privately that you were present the night this crime took place. I need you to tell the jury exactly what you saw." The little girl glanced toward Rex. The dog's ears twitched as if he understood what was being asked of her. She took a deep breath. "I woke up because there was yelling outside," she began, her words deliberate. "I climbed on my chair to look out the window. That's when I saw him." The defense attorney gestured gently. "Do you mean you saw the man the police said was guilty?" She shook her head firmly. "No, the man I saw was taller. He had a scar right here." Again, she traced her finger down her cheek. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. The prosecutor shot to her feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This is highly speculative. She's a child. She could be mistaken." "Overruled," the judge said firmly. "The witness may continue." The girl went on, describing how Rex had chased the man through the alley, barking so loudly she thought he would wake the whole neighborhood. She told them about how the man tripped and looked straight at her before running again. When she finished, the defense attorney spoke softly. "And is the man sitting over there?" He gestured toward the defendant. "The man you saw that night?" The little girl stared at the defendant for a long moment before shaking her head. "No, that's not him." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. One juror actually dropped his pen. The defendant closed his eyes, as if trying to absorb the words he had been waiting so long to hear. Then, before anyone could speak, Rex barked sharply, his trained alert bark. 1, 2, 3 times, then sat perfectly still, staring at the defendant. The handler froze. "Your Honor," he said carefully, "that's Rex's negative response. He's signaling that the person in front of him is not the one he tracked that night." The courtroom erupted. The prosecutor scrambled to salvage the situation. "This is unprecedented. Dogs cannot testify. We cannot rely on." But the judge slammed his gavel, restoring order. "We are not asking the dog to testify, counsel. We are observing his trained response as corroboration of a witness's account." The defense attorney seized the moment. "Your Honor, this is precisely what we've been arguing all along. My client was never the man Rex cornered that night." The prosecution's case rests almost entirely on the assumption that the dog's tracking led to the right man. Clearly, it did not. The prosecutor looked flustered, but tried to regain control. Even if this testimony is accepted, it does not completely exonerate the defendant. There is still circumstantial, but she was cut off again, this time by Rex. The dog had risen to his feet, pulling at his leash, eyes fixed on the little girl. He let out a low whine, and then, astonishingly, moved closer to her. The handler tried to hold him back, but the judge raised a hand. Let him go. Rex trotted up to the witness stand and sat beside the girl, tail wagging slowly. He leaned against her leg as though to reassure her. The sight was so moving that even a few members of the jury smiled. The defense attorney spoke again, this time with quiet confidence. Your Honor, this dog is telling us everything we need to know. He remembers. And now, so does she. The man sitting here has been falsely accused. The judge didn't respond right away. He glanced at the jury, at the little girl, at Rex. The weight of the moment was palpable. This court will review the body cam footage from that night, he said at last. We will see exactly what this dog saw. He called for a short recess to set up the video equipment. The courtroom buzzed with excitement and tension as the jury filed out. Reporters scribbled furiously, aware they were witnessing history in the making. At the defense table, the accused man bowed his head, whispering something to his attorney. Whatever he said made the lawyer nod grimly, determination flashing in his eyes. Rex remained by the little girl's side until she was escorted out with her mother. The handler gave the dog a pat, but Rex never took his eyes off the girl until the door closed behind her. When the room finally emptied, the prosecutor stood alone, staring at her notes, her expression clouded with worry. For the first time since the trial began, she looked as though she was no longer certain of her case. When the courtroom reconvened after recess, the air was heavy with anticipation. Jurors filed back into their seats, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Reporters' cameras clicked softly as the technician wheeled in a monitor and laptop to play the body cam footage. The defendant sat upright at the defense table, hands clasped tightly. The little girl was back in the gallery with her mother, clutching a stuffed animal for comfort. Rex, lying at his handler's feet, looked more alert than ever, as if he too understood that this was a turning point. The judge cleared his throat. We will now review the footage recorded by Officer Daniel's body camera the night of the incident. Both prosecution and defense have agreed to show the unedited version in its entirety. The lights dimmed, and the screen flickered to life. At first, the video was chaotic. Darkness, sudden jerks as the officer ran down an alley, the sound of heavy breathing and Rex barking loudly. The jury leaned forward, straining to see. Then the scene stabilized as the flashlight beam found its target. A man sprinting away, glancing over his shoulder. Gasps filled the room. The man on the screen wasn't the defendant. His hair was longer, his build slightly heavier, and as the girl had said, there was a distinct scar running down his left cheek. Freeze there, the defense attorney said, standing. The technician paused the video. The scarred face stared back at everyone in high resolution. The jurors exchanged glances, some whispering. The prosecutor stiffened. Your Honor, there could be multiple suspects in the area that night. This does not, but she fell silent when the video resumed. The footage showed Rex taking off, his powerful body lunging forward. The officer shouted commands, but the dog was locked on the scent. He cornered the man near a dumpster, growling, waiting for his handler to catch up. And then, a crucial moment the public had never seen. Another figure appeared from the shadows, shouting something unintelligible. There was a brief scuffle, the sound of a bottle smashing, and the man with the scar fled, not toward the defendant's apartment, but in the opposite direction. The officer tried to pursue, but the second figure shoved him against the wall and ran off. The camera captured only a partial view of this second person. A jacket, a gloved hand, but it was enough to show that the attacker and the first man were not the same. The footage ended with the officer cursing under his breath and calling for backup. When the lights came back on, The courtroom was silent. "This," the defense attorney said, voice steady but firm, "is evidence that has been in police custody since the night of the crime." And yet, this jury was led to believe there was only one suspect, and that my client was that man. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you just saw proves otherwise." The prosecutor's face had gone pale. She rose slowly. "Your Honor, the state was not aware of this additional footage. It appears the original file provided to us was edited." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting that key evidence was withheld from the court?" "I am suggesting, Your Honor, that we were misled as well," the prosecutor said, her voice tight. The defense attorney pounced. "Which raises the question, who had the motive to alter that footage? My client has been sitting in jail for months because someone wanted this trial to go one way, and it wasn't toward justice." The jury watched in rapt attention. Some of them were clearly angry now, their earlier skepticism replaced by outrage. Then, as if to drive the point home, Rex stood abruptly, pulling on his leash. He trotted toward the screen, where the man with the scar's face was still frozen. He barked twice, and sat down, tail straight behind him, the exact posture of his trained, positive identification. It was the closest thing to a dog's testimony the court had ever seen. The handler spoke softly. "Your Honor, that's Rex confirming that this was the man he was tracking that night. He remembers the scent." The little girl in the gallery spoke up suddenly, her voice trembling but determined. "That's him. That's the man I saw outside my window." All eyes turned to her. The judge didn't scold her for interrupting. Instead, he nodded gravely, acknowledging what she had just confirmed. "This court," the judge said, "will order an immediate forensic review of the chain of evidence in this case. It is clear that we may be dealing with suppression of exculpatory evidence, a serious violation." The prosecutor didn't object this time. Her shoulders slumped slightly, as though she too realized the gravity of what had just been revealed. The defendant buried his face in his hands. For the first time since the trial began, tears rolled down his cheeks, tears of relief. The judge called another recess so the jury could recover from what they had just seen. As they filed out, murmurs filled the room. Reporters already drafting headlines, legal analysts whispering that the trial had just taken a dramatic turn. In the hallway outside, the girl's mother hugged her tightly. "You are so brave," she whispered. Rex stood beside them, watchful and calm, as though he knew his job was only half done. Back inside, the prosecutor requested a private conference with the judge and defense attorney. Whatever was said behind those closed doors was not made public, but when they returned, the judge's face was set like stone. "This court will adjourn for today," he announced. "Tomorrow, we will hear from the internal affairs officer, assigned to review why this footage was not presented in discovery. Until then, the defendant is remanded to custody, but I will be considering a motion for release based on these new revelations." The defense attorney nodded, satisfied. The prosecutor gathered her files silently, her mind clearly racing. As the courtroom emptied, Rex remained sitting by the monitor, still staring at the frozen image of the scarred man. It was as though he knew that somewhere out there, the real culprit was still walking free, and he wasn't going to rest until the hunt was over. The next morning, the courthouse buzzed with tension. Word had spread overnight about the body cam footage and the dog's unmistakable identification. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones ready, while legal commentators speculated on live TV that this could be one of the most dramatic courtroom reversals in recent memory. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. The defendant was brought in wearing a suit instead of his jail uniform, a quiet but powerful signal from his attorney that they were preparing for his potential release. He sat straighter this time, hope flickering in his eyes. Rex padded into the courtroom with his handler, tail wagging lightly, as if sensing the momentum shifting. The little girl returned as well, holding her mother's hand. She looked less frightened today, her bravery from the previous afternoon clearly still giving her strength. The judge entered, face stern, and called the court to order. Today, he announced, we will hear testimony from Internal Affairs regarding the mishandling of crucial evidence in this case. Officer Daniels, please take the stand. The officer, still wearing his uniform, approached the witness chair with visible unease. He swore the oath and sat down, avoiding eye contact with nearly everyone. The prosecutor was first to question him. Officer Daniels, can you explain to the court why the body cam footage we saw yesterday was not turned over in discovery? Daniels cleared his throat. Ma'am, I submitted my footage to evidence the night of the incident. I had no knowledge it was altered. Are you saying someone tampered with it after you turned it in? Yes, ma'am, he said. Our department's digital evidence logs show that the file was accessed 2 days later by a different officer's login. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The prosecutor continued. Whose login was used? Daniels hesitated. It belonged to Sergeant Cole. At the mention of the name, several heads in the gallery turned. Cole was well known in the department, a veteran with a spotless reputation. The revelation sent a wave of shock through the courtroom. The prosecutor pressed on. And what is your opinion as to why Sergeant Cole would alter this footage? I can't speak to his motives, Daniels said carefully. But the edit removed the appearance of the second suspect and made it look like we lost track of only one man that night. The defense attorney took over. Officer, do you know where Sergeant Cole is now? Daniels nodded grimly. He's on administrative leave pending investigation. And is it true, the attorney said, pacing slowly, that Sergeant Cole was the first to suggest my client was the prime suspect? Yes. The jurors exchanged uneasy looks. The picture was becoming clear. The wrong man had been targeted, and someone inside the department had helped make that happen. Then the defense attorney did something unexpected. Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to allow Rex to assist in this next part of the proceedings. The judge raised an eyebrow. Explain. Yesterday, the attorney said, this dog correctly identified the man in the footage as the one he tracked that night. With Officer Daniels present, we'd like to present a lineup of photos, including Sergeant Cole, and observe Rex's response. The prosecutor looked surprised, but did not object. The state has no issue. If this dog can corroborate further, it may help us locate the true perpetrator. The judge nodded. Very well. Proceed. A bailiff brought out a large board with 6 photos clipped to it, mugshots and department photos of potential suspects, including Cole and the scarred man from the footage. Rex was brought to the front of the room. The handler gave him a quiet command to sniff. The German shepherd's nose twitched as he moved down the line, pausing briefly at each photo. Then he stopped at the scarred man's photo and barked once. Everyone watched as he moved to the next picture, Cole's, and froze. His body stiffened, his tail dropped, and a deep growl rumbled in his chest. Handler? The judge asked. The handler swallowed. That's Rex's alert for a known associate. He's indicating that Cole's scent matches someone connected to the man he chased that night. The room erupted with noise. The prosecutor immediately requested that Cole be brought in for questioning. Within an hour, 2 uniformed officers escorted a pale and visibly shaken Sergeant Cole into the courtroom. He was still in his dress blues, but his badge had been removed. Cole took the stand reluctantly. The prosecutor wasted no time. Sergeant Cole, did you alter Officer Daniels' footage? Cole hesitated and nodded. Yes. Why? Because I was trying to protect an ongoing undercover operation, Cole said quickly. The second man in that video was one of our informants. If his face had been released, he could have been killed. The defense attorney shot up from his chair. So to protect an informant, You are willing to let an innocent man stand trial for a crime he didn't commit? Cole's face flushed. I didn't think it would go this far. I believed we had enough circumstantial evidence against the defendant. I never imagined it would reach trial. You never imagined? The attorney repeated incredulously. Sir, this man has been locked up for months. His life was falling apart while you covered for someone else. The jury's faces showed their anger. One juror actually shook her head in disgust. The judge's voice cut through the uproar. Sergeant Cole, you have admitted to tampering with evidence, a felony offense. You will be taken into custody immediately pending charges. Cole was handcuffed right there in the courtroom, his head bowed. Rex barked once, almost as if satisfied. But the judge wasn't finished. Given this testimony and the evidence we saw yesterday, I am granting the defense's motion for immediate release of the defendant on his own recognizance. This case is no longer about whether he is guilty. It is about finding the man with the scar and bringing him to justice. The defendant's attorney put a hand on his client's shoulder. The man looked as though he might collapse from relief. Tears streamed down his face again, but this time they were accompanied by a shaky smile. The little girl clapped softly from the gallery. Rex turned to look at her, wagging his tail. Reporters raced out of the courtroom to break the news. A police sergeant arrested, a wrongfully accused man freed, and a police canine at the center of it all. But as the court adjourned, Rex stayed standing, ears pricked. His job wasn't finished. Somewhere out there, the man with the scar was still free, and Rex intended to find him. The morning after the dramatic courtroom reversal, the police department's atmosphere was electric. Reporters swarmed outside, cameras rolling, demanding updates. For the first time in months, the defendant, now a free man, stood on the courthouse steps, speaking quietly to the press. His attorney stood beside him, thanking the court for granting his release. But even as reporters celebrated the legal victory, the most important piece of the puzzle remained unsolved. The scarred man was still on the run. Inside the precinct, Rex stood at attention, his handler strapping on his harness. The dog's dark eyes were focused, his entire body tense with purpose. Captain Harris, who had been assigned to clean up the mess left by Sergeant Cole, turned to the small group of detectives assembled in the room. We're done playing defense, she said. We know who our man is, and thanks to Rex, we've got a scent trail. Today, we bring him in. The little girl and her mother had been asked to stay home for safety, but they'd given detectives a final detail that morning. The man with the scar had been wearing a distinctive jacket with a torn sleeve. That piece of information had been entered into the Citywide Bolo. Rex was led to the evidence room, where the board with the photos still stood. He was commanded to sit, then given the command to search. His nose twitched as he sniffed the air. Then he turned toward the door, muscles coiling. He's got it, the handler said. Let's move. The search team piled into their vehicles. Rex rode in the back of the canine SUV, silent but alert, his tail flicking occasionally, as if he already knew where they were headed. The trail led them into an industrial part of the city, a maze of warehouses and loading docks. As soon as Rex jumped out of the SUV, he lowered his head and began to pull hard on the lead. He's hot on it, the handler called. Detectives followed close behind, weapons ready but nerves taut. The sound of Rex's claws clicking against the concrete echoed in the empty streets as he tracked the scent. He led them past a chain-link fence, across a loading yard, and toward a row of abandoned shipping containers. Then he stopped abruptly, barking furiously. Suspects close, the handler warned. One detective pried open the container door. Inside, huddled in the shadows, was the man with the scar. His eyes widened when he saw Rex, and in an instant he bolted. Stop, police! The suspect took off down the yard, weaving between containers. Rex lunged forward, nearly yanking the leash from his handler's hands. "Release him," Captain Harris ordered. The handler unclipped the lead. "Get him, Rex." The German shepherd became a blur of motion, racing after the suspect with a deep, echoing bark. Detectives sprinted behind, but Rex closed the gap faster than any human could. The man vaulted over a stack of pallets, but Rex leapt effortlessly after him. The suspect stumbled, glancing over his shoulder just in time to see 85 pounds of determined canine barreling toward him. He tried to scramble away, but Rex struck like a missile, clamping onto the man's forearm with a controlled bite. The suspect cried out, hitting the ground hard. By the time detectives caught up, Rex had pinned him in place, growling low but not releasing until his handler gave the command. "Good boy," the handler said, pulling Rex back while two officers cuffed the man. The suspect's face was pale, sweat running down the scarred cheek. "You've got nothing on me," he spat. "Oh, we've got plenty," Captain Harris said coldly, "starting with your face on body cam footage and ending with the fact that this dog just tracked you here. A search of his hiding place turned up stolen property from the original crime scene and a weapon that matched the ballistics from the case. It was the final piece of evidence they needed." As they loaded the suspect into the squad car, Rex sat beside the handler, tongue lolling, clearly satisfied. "You just solved the case, partner," the handler murmured, scratching behind his ears. By the time they returned to the precinct, news crews were already waiting. Cameras flashed as the scarred man was led inside in handcuffs. The public finally had a face for the mysterious fugitive that had kept them on edge. Later that afternoon, the defendant was called back to the courthouse, where he was officially cleared of all charges. The prosecutor herself addressed the court, her voice steady but tinged with regret. "The state formally drops all charges against the defendant," she said. "We have located and apprehended the individual responsible for the crime. The evidence against him is overwhelming. Justice, though delayed, will be served." The defendant exhaled shakily. For months, he had lived under the shadow of a crime he didn't commit. Now, he was free, truly free. The little girl was brought into the courtroom one last time, at the judge's request. She sat quietly, watching as the scarred man was escorted in. "That's him," she said softly, her voice unwavering. The judge nodded. "Your courage helped us find the truth," he told her. Rex, lying at his handler's feet, looked up at her as though he understood. Outside, as the press swarmed the steps, the defendant knelt down to pet Rex. "You saved my life," he said simply. Rex licked his hand, tail thumping once. But even as the cameras captured the moment, everyone in the crowd seemed to understand that this was more than just the story of a man being cleared. It was the story of how a little girl, a brave dog, and a courtroom full of strangers had refused to give up until the truth came out. The case was no longer just a headline. It had become a symbol of what could happen when justice, though shaken, was not broken. And Rex, sitting proudly at the center of it all, had become the city's newest hero. The final day of the trial dawned crisp and clear. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and onlookers, all eager to witness the conclusion of one of the most unusual and dramatic cases in recent memory. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, but there was an underlying sense of hope, the kind that comes when truth finally starts to take shape. The defendant, now exonerated, sat quietly at the defense table. He wore a modest suit, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion and relief in equal measure. His attorney had briefed him on the day's proceedings. The court would formally sentence the scarred man and officially recognize Rex's role in tracking him, as well as the bravery of the little girl who had first pointed him out. Rex, for his part, lay calmly at the handler's feet, ears perked. Though he had chased down the suspect and secured evidence, he was patient, waiting for the next command. aware that the final act of this long drama was about to unfold. The gallery was packed. The little girl sat beside her mother, clutching a small notebook and pencil, a gift from the court clerk for her bravery. She was quiet, but her eyes sparkled with anticipation. She had already witnessed the power of her words and Rex's instincts, and now she was about to see justice finalized. The judge entered, his robes flowing behind him, though his expression was softened by a hint of pride. The courtroom quieted instantly. "Today," the judge began, "we bring closure to this case, one that has captivated our community and challenged the very notion of evidence and testimony. We will formally acknowledge the true perpetrator and ensure that justice, though delayed, is delivered." The scarred man was brought in, handcuffed, eyes darting nervously around the room. He was defiant at first, but the weight of the room's attention was suffocating. The prosecutor stood, her voice steady. "Your Honor, the state acknowledges that the defendant sitting at the defense table is innocent of all charges. The evidence confirms this, and we formally withdraw all accusations. Furthermore, we recommend the maximum sentence for the individual responsible for the crime, now identified as the man with the scar, who evaded justice for months." Gasps echoed in the courtroom, though most were from the realization that months of fear and misinformation had been caused by human error, and, in part, by deliberate tampering. The defense attorney stood next. "Your Honor, this case has been extraordinary. My client has endured months of uncertainty, wrongful imprisonment, and emotional turmoil. We are grateful that the truth has prevailed, and that the bravery of a child and the instincts of a police dog have brought this nightmare to an end." The little girl fidgeted nervously as the judge spoke again. "I wish to formally commend this young witness," he said, pointing toward her. "Her keen observation and courage have been pivotal. Without her testimony, the chain of events might have remained unresolved. You have shown remarkable bravery for someone your age." The girl's mother hugged her gently, whispering, "See? You did something amazing." Rex shifted slightly at his handler's side, sensing the praise and excitement in the room. The handler gave him a small pat. "Good boy," he murmured. Rex wagged his tail slowly, almost modestly, as though he understood the gravity of the moment, but didn't require praise. Then the judge addressed the scarred man. "You are hereby formally charged for the crimes you committed that night, including assault and attempted theft. Considering the gravity of your actions and your deliberate evasion of justice, the court will sentence you accordingly." The man's defiance faltered. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid, realizing that every maneuver he had used to evade capture had failed. Rex's presence seemed to amplify that fear, a silent, unyielding reminder of justice closing in. The judge continued, detailing the charges, and formally sentenced the man to a lengthy prison term. The courtroom remained silent, absorbing the weight of the verdict. The scarred man was led away in handcuffs, escorted by officers who had watched the trial's extraordinary turn from disbelief to closure. Then, the courtroom turned to the softer, more emotional moments. The judge asked the little girl and her mother to approach the bench. "Your courage, young lady," the judge said, "has brought clarity where there was confusion, safety where there was fear, and justice where there was wrongdoing. On behalf of this court, I thank you." The girl's cheeks flushed. She looked down shyly, then glanced at Rex, who seemed to meet her gaze knowingly. She whispered softly, "We did it, Rex." The gallery, moved by the scene, erupted into applause. The defendant, now officially free, walked over and knelt to meet the girl's gaze. "I can never thank you enough," he said. "You saved my life. You and Rex." Rex, sensing the attention, nudged the girl gently with his nose, then wagged his tail. The little girl laughed softly, a sound that seemed to lift the tension from the room. Outside, the press descended on the steps of the courthouse. Cameras clicked and microphones were thrust forward as the story made its way into headlines. Child and canine bring justice. Wrongfully accused man freed. The defendant took a deep breath, turning to face the cameras. This wouldn't have been possible without the bravery of a little girl and her companion, a dog who knows right from wrong, better than anyone I've ever met. The little girl waved shyly from behind her mother's arm, and Rex sat calmly by, his job complete, but his presence commanding respect. Later, in a quieter moment, the defendant knelt on the courthouse steps with Rex beside him, hand on the dog's head. "You were my hero," he whispered. Rex leaned into him, as if to confirm that he had simply done what was right. The little girl, standing a few feet away, sketched a small picture of Rex and the defendant in her notebook, a keepsake of the incredible story she had been part of. "See?" she said to her mother. "We made everything right." Her mother smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Yes, we did," she said softly. Across the city, the scarred man was booked into the state penitentiary. For the first time in months, the wrongfully accused man could go home. The city had been reminded that truth often comes from the most unexpected places: a child's memory, a dog's instincts, and the patience of those willing to listen. The courthouse doors closed behind Rex, the little girl, and the freed defendant. The afternoon sunlight reflected off the marble steps, casting long shadows. The story of fear, false accusation, and ultimate justice had reached its conclusion, leaving the people who had witnessed it forever changed. And as the little girl and Rex walked home together that day, the city around them seemed a little brighter, a little safer. They had shown that courage comes in many forms, that heroes can wear fur as well as shoes, and that even the smallest voice can speak volumes, if only someone listens. Justice had been served. Truth had prevailed. And Rex, the German shepherd who had changed everything, finally settled at the little girl's feet, tail wagging gently, knowing the world was a little better for what they had done together.